Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the HES. This is their part number 1006KM. This is an electric strike is what it is, and we're going to start with a review of the 1006 series, but then get into and talk specifically about what the KM version of it is. And it's really just a modular faceplate, which is what, you know, when I first learned about Hes, when I first became aware of Hes strikes in probably the 1990s, I don't recall, it was all about the faceplates. You know, you have a cylindrical lock, use this one. You have a mortise lock, use this one, or this one, or this one, etc. So it struck a chord in my mind that, oh, that's simple. You know, you know what your prep is going to be in your frame. You know what you're going to be doing in terms of prepping for this, and then all you're doing is swapping out your faceplate, which we'll get into in a moment. This happens to be the KM, which is for a specific type of, well, it's for a mortise lock, but there are mortise locks where the deadlocking tab is above your latch, and there are some that are below, and we'll get into that. So the 1006, let's start with a visual review. This is a fail secure strike. That means right out of the box, the way you take it out of the box is what it's defined as. This is defined as fail secure, and that means that the keeper is locked without power. Okay, so in the absence of power, this is locked. This would be appropriate for use in those applications where the door is going to be, where the circuit's going to be normally open, no power flowing through, and you want to temporarily close the circuit or energize the circuit to allow the electric strike to permit the lock to pass through. Okay. And let's start with a visual tour of the material. So we have the strike body itself. The defining feature of this really is the very long keeper. And one reason that they have this incredibly long keeper is because they have faceplates that also allow mortise locks with deadbolts to work as well. And that was a, mind blown, moment when I first realized, that you could certainly have an electric strike with a mortise lock that incorporates a deadbolt. You're going to get what is your trim enhancer, and this mounts. This is going to mount, outside to clean off your preparation, your cut in the frame. This is in the rabbet of the frame, what you see here, but then you have to cut the face of the frame as well to accommodate the strike, and this trim enhancer is included to make that look better at the end of the day. They have some keeper shims also included in the package, and they are here, these long pieces of metal with these small screws. There appear to be two of them in there, and they attach to the inside of the keeper, and there are locations for screws down in here, and what you're doing is you are padding the installation. You're placing those shims inside of the keeper so that you can obtain a better relationship between the back of the latch bolt and the inside face of the keeper to tighten that installation up. You don't want a tremendous amount of movement of the door when it's in the closed position. There are also 12 and 24 volt, what they call pigtails. You have a connector on the back of your strike. You're going to choose one of these two connectors, 12 or 24, DC. And that's how you'll connect it. Those quick connectors are there as well. And then, of course, we have our KM faceplate, which we're going to get to in detail when we get down to the the supporting product detail information on this item. There are installation instructions that are not only included with the paperwork, but also included down below, and they go through a detail installation of this material. And quickly looking at it, you realize that the installation is like all other electric strikes. This preparation is larger than many. It's not as big as some, but the preparation is, part of the rabbet, part of the face, and then you're in good shape there. So let's switch to the camera. Let's switch to the screen view, where we can look at the installation instructions together, and we'll go over it basically step-by-step sort of scenario and talk about how to go about installing it. So this here is the item that we are looking at, the 1006KM, and we have extended description information. We have discussion on what the KM faceplate is. This is a great, let's go through it. This is a grade 1 strike, UL listed for doors up to 3 hour. Obviously needs to be fail secure in that sort of event. Stainless steel construction, tamper resistant, 2,400 pounds of strength. I believe that number is actually 2,500. We'll check the current data and see if that's still the case. This is a grade 1 electric strike, which means it's rated to 1 million cycles. That doesn't mean at the 1 million and first cycle it stops working. Who knows, how many cycles it would survive. It passed the most stringent grade defined by ANSI. It is non-handed. The body itself can be used in either direction. An interesting interaction I had with a Hes 1006 strike is when I had sold a client who was controlling a employee entrance door to a 3-shift manufacturing factory outside of Chicago, and the strike worked for 3 or 4 weeks, and then the contractor called me naturally in a panic on a Saturday afternoon or late morning because the employees couldn't enter. The door was not unlocking, and the trouble with that is how employees were punching in and punching out, so to speak, clocking in, clocking out via their card over the card reader. And they said that the strike worked intermittently. And I says, well, what's changed? Nothing's changed. Okay, so I went out to the job site and realized that there was a mechanical problem with the strike, that it did indeed work intermittently. And I discovered that I determined mechanically that it worked mechanically correct, but electrically it was working intermittently. I then decided the next step is to check the voltage coming in. And I searched around for evidence of the power supply, and I couldn't find it anywhere near the opening. And I traced the wires back to about 500 feet back. And I called the contractor and said, has the power always been at the rear of this building? He's like, and I was told no, they had just relocated it the prior night because they wanted to move the power supply to where the other power supplies were. And it went from 20 feet away to 500 feet away. And I explained to the client that was exactly what the problem was and why it was behaving intermittently, because the distance and the gauge of wire has everything to do with the voltage that you're able to deliver. So what they did was they substantially increased the length that the voltage had to move from input to the load. They did not increase the gauge of their wire, and that was the problem. They needed to increase the gauge of wire to cover the distance, and they were using I would assume it was just 18 gauge wire. Well, that wasn't adequate for the voltage and amperage requirements of the strike given the distance. And I explained to the client they either needed to put the power supply back where it was or increase the diameter of the wire, because the thicker the wire, the less resistance there is to current passing through the wire. And at that point, there was nothing I could do short of notifying the client of what the problem was, and that was the last I heard of that scenario. They say there's horizontal adjustment. We'll review that. Continuous duty operation. Sure, this can be powered indefinitely. There's not a problem with Hes strikes, or at least the 1006. An 1 11/16 backset. I'm not sure what they're referring to there, but we'll review the installation template. Now, the KM faceplate, that's what's interesting, and we're going to talk about all their faceplates, but this is compatible with this series of mortise locks. And what that really means is the location of where they put their deadlocking tab in relationship to the latch bolt. And what's really great about the 1006 series strikes is that it doesn't require a relocation of the center line because of the entire principle of the faceplate. The faceplate has been cut to accommodate the latch bolt, etc., coming out of the edge of the lock. Therefore, you don't have to worry about a relocation of the center line. Some accessories that I think we'll get to as we get into the other documentation. Now let's move into the installation instructions. Page 1 shows you what you get, basically, and there's not a lot to it. You get the strike body, you're going to get your shims, your pigtails, and then your trim enhancer. And it will give you the electrical characteristics of what you're dealing with. Under continuous duty, and I would expect that this strike will certainly not be continuous duty whatsoever because it's fail secure. Here is your amp requirement. As the voltage goes up, your amps go down, and you will, I don't know if you see 24 volt more commonly than 12 volt because of that, but you will absolutely notice that your amps go down substantially. And when you have a system that will involve multiple pieces, multiple loads, multiple items requiring electricity, the higher the voltage, smaller the amperage. So be mindful of that. And you'll see here where we got in trouble with the client who moved his power supply so far away. I don't recall the voltage that they were running. I expect it was 24 volt, but they were well beyond their 18 gauge specification, and that's why that strike was not operating correctly, or it was why it was operating intermittently, I should say. Before connecting any device at the installation site, verify input voltage using a multimeter. Absolutely. Check your voltage prior to connecting anything. Then, of course, disconnect your power while you're making your connections. Many power supplies and low voltage transformers operate at higher levels than listed. Any input voltage exceeding the 10% of the solenoid, which is mentioned here, plus or minus 10%, may cause severe damage to the unit. You want to absolutely make sure that you are not giving it more power or operating it, in fact, with less power than it's designed for. Your pigtail identification, they're clearly indicated. I have them on my desk. As you saw earlier, they are clearly indicated. Select the appropriate plug-in connector that matches the system power and electrically connect as illustrated in diagram 2, which is here. So in diagram 2, we've got our strike. We already have our connector. If the connector is missing, looking at the unit, we do have a violet. We have 2 reds. They say red-green. Oh yeah, that is red-green. There's a green stripe on the back of it. You've got your black and your violet, your red and your red-green. Okay, and that's how you would wire this. Should you be needing to cut those wires for whatever reason, if you don't have pigtails, sure, you'll be doing that as well. This connecting to here, giving you the 2 wires necessary. Otherwise, tie these wires together and you'll be off to the races. Okay, your positive and your negative under 12 volt. If you're running 24 volt, you'll have a violet and a red only for positive and negative. Then your black and red-green, you will simply tie them together and then put a wire nut and finish that wire nut off with electric tape. Okay, so now we have a couple of options. This strike does not come with LBM wiring or LBSM wiring, but let's talk about what both of those are. Okay, so the LBM and LBSM. Here's the bottom line. There is a latch bolt monitor. There is going to be a micro switch connected to a trigger in the back of the strike area. That is going to detect the presence of a latch bolt. It's basically going to say whether or not the door is closed and the latch bolt is engaged in the back of the strike. You use of that is if someone were to attempt to Lloyd the latch bolt by pulling it back, that micro switch would be triggered. Okay, it knows when there is a latch bolt there or not, or when that is depressed or not. So that detects the presence of a latch bolt. The LBSM latch bolt strike monitor, that does the latch bolt monitoring. It gives you that functionality, a micro switch back in the bottom of the strike area, but it also has a micro switch connected to the keeper. So now you can monitor the strike operation itself. You can record back to access control, you know, how many times this keeper has physically moved. Okay, and that's what the LBSM gives you in addition to the LBM. So you can monitor the latch bolt, or you can monitor the latch bolt and the strike if you go to the LBSM. Those are the two options on this strike. Now let's take a look at the physical prepping of the door and frame. So when they're saying that there's no relocation necessary, there, you know, it's just like it was a standard mortise lock with a standard mechanical strike. There's no relocation necessary to adjust the electric strike to suit the mortise lock. Okay, so we're doing a mortise lock here. 1006 with mortise locks, 1006 with cylindrical locks. The easy one first is the cylindrical lock, meaning the center line of the door needs to be the center line of the strike. And then, of course, you have the appropriate faceplate for that application. So if your door is 43 and 9/16 from the top of the door to the center of the cylindrical lock, it needs to be 43 and 11/16 when you measure from the underside of the header to the center of the prep. Now coming over here to the mortise lock, you'll notice that you have a 3/8 difference between the center line of the strike and the center line of the lock body. Well, that's standard. That's because a 7-foot door, let's just say Steelcraft, is going to be, it'll be 43 and 9/16 on a cylindrical lock. You add 3/8 to that, and then you're going to have 43 and 15/16. And if you measured a standard Steelcraft 7-foot mortise pocket door, top of the door to the center of the lock pocket, it's going to be 43 and 15/16. You're going to take 3/8 off of that, and you're going to get to the center line of the strike. And then again, if you're measuring on the frame itself, you'll have an additional 1/8 of an inch there, which is the margin from the underside of the head. So it's really a 1/4 inch difference. It'd be 43 and 15 here, and when you measure on the frame, it would be 43 and 11/16. But that is a relocation of 3/8 of an inch. So what they're saying is every mortise lock, almost every mortise lock, has this sort of offset from each other's center line, the center line of the lock and the center line of the strike, by 3/8. The door is already adjusted accordingly. The strike that comes with your mortise lock is based on this relationship between center line. The point of all of this is that your Hes 1006, you don't have to think about it. There's nothing to relocate. If you were to be doing a mortise, if you were to be doing an electric strike by someone else, a different strike, yes, you might have to relocate that center line so that the center line of your keeper is the center line of not the lock pocket, but the center line of the latch bolt. So back in the old days, or in the good old current days, if you're dealing with an electric strike that has a keeper in a particular location, you're going to need to line that up with the hardware. With the 1006, they make it easy in the sense that you don't have to do anything different. You just have to prep that strike. Assuming that your mortise lock requires this 3/8 relocation of center line, which they almost all do, you'll just basically start with the stock preparation for the 4 7/8, and then you're just going to you're going to cut the face of the unit away is what you're going to do. Okay, so the installation aspect in that regard is simplified. Let's take a look down here at these drawings. Okay, so as we continue on, looking at our dimensional drawings, we are showing that's where your back set comes in. How much of the face, we had said earlier, I wasn't sure what that meant. The term back set confused me a bit. They're basically saying that of your typical 2-inch face, you're going to cut back 1 11/16, 3 3/8 tall or high on that. Okay, little cleaner drawing. Really all you need to know is 3 3/8 and then 1 11/16 back. That's going to put you right as rain. And then, of course, you've got alternate faceplates. You know, you can go with the 4 7/8. You can go with a larger faceplate on the Hes strike, and you would do that if you're dealing with an existing frame that has a preparation that you want to basically utilize, not modify the frame substantially. The strike that's here, you may not be able to get your hands on quick enough, and you can probably get a 1006 with a taller faceplate from stock. Okay, now complete pack options. What they're saying here is this strike is available with this strike is available in variants. You can order it off the shelf, and it's going to come with a mess of stuff already to go. A variety of faceplates, and then other options that can be included inside of the unit itself, such as this E-pack, which will obviously give you additional componentry to handle the type of lock that you're locking into it. H, HD, HM, and H2, additional material here, and we're not going to address all of the different package options of what you get, but just know that you know where to locate a detail of that material should it become necessary. Now, as we continue to move through the installation instructions, they're going to now detail the dimensional properties of all of the different faceplates that are available here. This is important to know when you are using this in conjunction with the information out of the catalog, which is here. So the chart that I remember is from the product catalog, which is also linked to or listed down below. It will give you an overview of what faceplate, an LB, a DB, etc., to use based on the lock type. Okay, but there are additional options that need to have attention paid to it, and I will use as a simple, and there's that 9-inch faceplate we talked about earlier. The faceplate in terms of the KD or KM option, this is a perfect example of why you need to refer to this drawing in the installation instructions. That's because these are both for mortise locks with up to a 3/4 inch latch bolt. Okay. Now, talking about electric strikes, as an aside, it is incredibly important to understand the projection of the latch bolt sticking out of the edge of the lock, because you have to be absolutely sure that you are using an electric strike that can accommodate the length of the latch bolt. If you were to use, and it happens, if you were to use an electric strike that is only meant to handle, let's say, typical aluminum storefront hardware that would have like a 1/2 inch throw, and then you try to stick into the depth of the keeper a latch bolt that's 3/4 inch projection, it's not going to work because the latch won't fully throw out, and it will jam. It will have, the latch will be under a situation where the lock may not be completely locked because the latch is not fully thrown, and there's just too much material being stuffed into that strike. So not only is it important to know that we're dealing with these compatible lock sets, but that this strike can handle a 3/4 inch latch. Now, will you have one longer than that? Well, you do need to be mindful of, you'll have deadbolts that will have a 1-inch throw on the bolt. But the fact of the matter is you need to be always mindful of the throw of your latch. Now, let's continue on and study this very simple difference. They've got the same lock, and they've got the same compatibility. So let's take a closer look. Now, the reason that this is important is because when you have the locks that are listed for compatibility, you'll notice that you have different faceplates that you're going to use with different mortise locks. Okay, so the KM, for instance, is compatible with the Arrow Baldwin Best Marks Omnia PDQ. Okay, well, what if you're using a Cal Royal lock? I don't see Cal Royal listed here at all. Or, some other import. So then you can refer to this document, and you might do some research and determine that the KM, where the dead latch is above the latch bolt rather than it being below. You might determine that your lock, or whatever you're using, meets that same criteria. And then you can look at the technical drawing of the KM to determine whether or not that's going to be compatible. Okay, so using this document in addition to the compatibility or lock cross-reference chart is very, very helpful. From that full-line catalog, sorry, it's here. You can even sort of get the concept where how they're trying to show you that prep is offset. You'd put your dead latch, in one position on this and another position here. Okay, so that's how you're going to go about determining which is your best option when it comes to a faceplate. And that concludes all of the installation instructions. Let's move on to the document that is this is literally just the lock cross-reference document, which is linked to down below. And it's the way to determine what strikes, not only what strikes HES has compatible, or I should say not only what faceplates are compatible, but what strikes are compatible as well. So that's a handy document to be able to refer to. Then as we move forward, we will get into the compatibility chart in terms of it being a cross-reference of an HES strike and then Fulgeratum, who is their sister company, Von Duprin versions, RCI, Trine, and SDC. You've got the dimensional drawing. That's nice, so you can take a look and see what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. You have what's called the cell sheet. It's just the one-page document that's going to talk about the features, stainless steel construction. That's where that 2,500 pound static strength comes in. Dynamic strength, 350 pounds as a fail-secure strike. 1,000,000 cycles, fail-secure as standard. They are non-handed. They can be flipped over. Accommodates up to a 1-inch deadbolt. Okay, so that will work with that prior statement about 3/4 inch latch bolt throw. The depth of the keeper here will accommodate those locks where you have deadbolts. Okay, so you can have a mortise lock that's going to have a deadbolt and add an electric strike to it and use an HES 1006 with the right faceplate. Plug-in connectors. Shims, keeper shims for horizontal adjustment. That's to allow you to take the door and tip it, or to allow the strike to work more compatibly, like I said earlier, with the way the door hangs in the frame and the way the lock is installed in the door, etc. A trim enhancer. We talked about this. We talked about at length the optional features in terms of the reporting, interchangeable faceplates. Okay. Down here, they have, you know, rim exit devices. The 1006 will not work with a rim exit device, but Hes has strikes that certainly will. Okay, then, and it's not in the link below this video, but the full product catalog can be found, and we've gone through the 1006 section, and there are the other faceplates to wrap that up that were the 9-inch tall version that you saw as well. So this link to the manufacturer's page is where you will find the current product catalog, all of the HES products that we sell, and then a link to the manufacturer's website. Let's finish up this video on camera. Now, to complete this video, we'll fire up the strike. I happen to have I keep a 24 volt DC 500 milliamp, just plug in power, transformer really on my desk. So we're going to use the 24 volt pigtail. We will connect that. Actually, let's just tie the wires first. So we're going to go, positive is black, and the negative wire on this pigtail is, it looks violet to me. I believe it to be violet. That's what they call it. Just going to turn these wires a little bit so they stay. Now, when you've got your wires connected, you're going to want to make sure they don't touch each other. I mean, if you're doing this correctly, you're going to have that all wired off, tied off, and not just trying to hold it in your hands to make sure that the wires don't short circuit against each other. And I'm just going to plug that in, plug my pigtail into the strike. Okay, we are not powered for some reason. Okay, so let's investigate why that's the case. So in a situation like this, you do need to use your voltmeter when there's no power, when your strike's not operating. So I'm going to set my voltmeter here and put my voltmeter on my leads. I've got 24 volts coming to it. So my power supply is working. I'm going to unplug that. So the bottom line is, I just had it wired incorrectly. I had the positive to the negative, and obviously didn't work even though we had voltage. So according to the installation instructions, your positive wire goes to violet and your negative wire goes to black. Well, on our 24 volt pigtail, we've got a violet and we have a black. So positive goes to violet. My power supply is identified for which of the two black wires is positive. And I don't think I had it wired backwards, but I can only say that I must have. So what I'm doing is just setting these wires on my desk so that they hold together without running wire nuts on there. I'm going to plug the power supply in. You're going to hear that strike click immediately. I've got it plugged in. Okay, that's it. This will be rated for continuous duty. As soon as I unplug the power, okay, so it's really simple. And the only thing that you're going to wire in between your power supply and your electric strike, of course, will be your switch. One of the four primary items used, obviously, in the construction of your circuit. So what I'm doing is, this is going to a client. I'm just going to straighten the wires out. It is nice to know that it works. meaning I've obviously tested that it works. So I think the Hes 1006 series strikes is certainly a good solution. No question, if you, assuming that you buy into the logic of their system, modular faceplates, a single cutout that you're going to do for a prep. You will see 1006 strikes used in a lot of places, and HES, along with their sister company Folger Atom, can field solutions for lots of applications. Folger Atom is a company that was from the suburbs of Chicago, and they have solutions, and they go way back. Folger Atom is a preferred electric strike vendor of mine, along with Von Duprin, in all fairness. But I like the Folger Atom strikes because they make electric strikes for pairs of doors with surface vertical rod exit devices, and that's quite a customized electric strike to do that. Okay, here's your label, ready to go. That link below this video to the manufacturer's page will allow you to review not only all of the HES Hanchett entry systems products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website and a link to the full product catalog, as I had said earlier. Any questions on the 1006 or any other HES strike, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.